All right, let's get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Johan. I work for Jumbo. You can find me on Twitter and on my website. If it's like a unique combination of words. So if you Google me, you will find me. So first of all, shout out to Jen for all the emceeing she's been doing yesterday and today as well. And also, I've been paying attention yesterday because I also have a cat, which is not really that important, but in the context of you, it seems like a big deal. Now, I want to tell you a story about how we use Nuxt at Jumbo, and I'll talk a bit more about what Jumbo is to serve our e-commerce. Now, what I'm going to tell you is not really meant as the best practice or as gospel. It's just a story to inform you about what works for us and what the context looked like. So you might take this as inspiration for your own organization. Also, we're not going to really do a deep dive into tech because from this point of view, like giving all of these contexts, it doesn't really add a lot of value to do a highly technical talk. So if you have questions about that, then go to the Nuxt team, right? Let's get started. First, a disclaimer. I'm Dutch. Jumbo is Dutch as well. And like we Dutch, we are pretty, we are known for doing things a bit differently. Like we live under sea level, like we don't even acknowledge that it exists, right? So you could call being Dutch, you could call that being eigenwijs, which is a Dutch word. And if you translate those two parts literally, you get something that's more in line like unique and wise. And you will see how this will affect our decisions, I hope at least. And let's first get started on the talk. So this title, I had some issues with it. I think it's really a complex title, actually. It's kind of a mouthful, but it will actually help me get a point across, because what we believe is if you do something that's complicated, you need to simplify it because that makes it a lot better. So let's simplify this and let's get started. So we're going to talk about Nuxt in large companies, basically. That's much better, right? Now, a bit of context about the company that I work for, Jumbo, which is like if you have been paying attention to the slides, it is a grocery chain, right? So we do offline and online groceries in the Netherlands and in Belgium. We're kind of a big deal there in those two very small countries in the world. We're doing pretty good. So we're in the top groceries. And we develop a lot of our software in-house. And in order to do that, we founded the Jumbo Tech Campus. And we do all of our software there. So this is where all of the bright minds gather to work together on our digital products. And again, as a size of scale, we have, I think, over 300 developers working there now. So that should give you a bit of context on the size that we're dealing with. And that's just the digital part, right? Now, in order to give you the full context, we're going to go back in time. Let's start with a small history lesson. We're going to give you some background so that you will understand how our decisions led to the architecture that we have now. And I think that's really important because if you look at it in hindsight, some of the choices may have been a bit strange, but if you look at it from the context of our history, it kind of makes sense, I hope. So spoiler alert, we're not going to be stuck in time. We're actually going to end up in the present, which is, I think, good. So our time travel begins like 8-9 years ago. That was when the Jumbo Tech Campus was founded, and it was founded having a department of just 1 or 2 Scrum teams, so really small. And they were tasked with doing e-commerce. And if you're tasked with doing e-commerce and you're a really small team and you need to serve a lot of customers, you just grab an off-the-shelf solution, right? That makes sense because then you can deliver quickly. And so that's what we did. And over time, we noticed that this was like a big monolith, which did basically everything. We discovered that this would not allow us to move as fast as we would like to do. So in order to be more agile, we started to decide to peel back some of the responsibility of that monolith and take it into our own hands. And in order to do that, we started to add a couple of view components to the platform, which allowed us to do stuff like displaying and login information or like these small animations and interactions and calls to a server without needing to deploy the entire monolith. Well, this was fine. But then over time, that department again started to grow. And we grew to having multiple teams working on the delivery of our e-commerce promise. And what we did, which I think also makes sense, is we decided to split every responsibility into teams that deal with a specific domain, and that domain would be part of the customer journey. So a customer would hit our website and just getting to our website was already a customer journey, right? But you also do shopping, browsing for products. That's also part of your journey. You do selecting an order, putting stuff in your basket. So we had all of these teams working on their own domain. And this is sort of like micro architecture supports this very well. So in the end, we went sort of from a monolith to a distributed applications architecture, if that's something that resonates. But we encountered something along the way. So there's a lot of work and research being done in evolving these systems. And we encountered the effects of the law, which states as a system evolves, its complexity increases unless work is done to maintain or reduce it. And this was actually becoming a challenge for us. So if we take a look at this picture, we decided to do things in order to reduce complexity. And what we did is we added more systems to this entire landscape, which, bear with me, it makes sense. So we added a CMS, and the CMS allowed us and our content editors to be in control of their domain. And in order to, and this allowed them to be in fully control of their content, and they don't have to rely on us developers to deploy stuff for them. They could just manage it by themselves. So we actually simplified a bit here. And since we were using Vue and we had all these applications using Vue components, it did make sense to build a component library, right? Because then you can reuse some of the UI and also a bit of the logic in your applications. So this actually looks good from that point of view. But we didn't end there. We had all of these teams, and like what we value is independent ownership of those teams and what those teams did, knowing that we are on Vue.js and knowing that we have a component library and knowing that we want to do server-side rendering and knowing that we want to serve our customers a decent experience. They started to add or convert their domain. So parts of the monolith were converted into Nuxt applications. So in order to reduce complexity, we started to do these steps. And I have some good news now because we are now at the end of our time travel. So we ended up, I think, a year in the past, more or less, give or take. We're close to present day. And we have this, and we wanted to reduce complexity. Now, if you see this, does this look like reduced complexity? Well, it sort of more resembles this situation, right? Which is fine because we are developers. There are brighter minds than I am who are working here, and we can resolve something. We can make something better out of this. So at this point, we had all of these micro applications doing stuff. We had all these instances that needed to maintain. All of them were plugged into the component library, and we wanted to keep that up to date as well. So we were having to do a lot of chores and maintenance. And we did not want to do that, and we did not want to continue doing that. So in order to make ourselves better and improve the process that we have, we sat together and we said, okay, so we have this situation. We know what we want. So what are the parts that we want to keep in and what are the parts that we want to keep out? We want to be sure that we can develop sustainable in the future as well, but still continue to be self-reliant as a team. That was our goal. So we made sort of a shopping list where we said we value this. We want to have a modular landscape where we can easily add or remove applications. So we wanted to have independent moving parts, which act like individual systems that work together on a coherent basis from the customer's perspective. And we wanted to simplify the dependencies because we will think that this will lead to simplifying all of the maintenance and the chores that we have. Now, those are big changes. And if you do big changes and you want to spend a lot of effort on it, you need to consider, are there any solutions that we can use off the shelf to save time and money? Well, for us, that was really a no-go because we already had such a complex landscape, which you couldn't really slap on a new solution and expect it to work out of the box. We also considered using Nuxt as a single application who would do everything for us. And then we would connect or hook up all of these modules into it and see if that will work. And for our situation, we discarded this idea because we wanted to have people not working in that same code base and being dependent on each other's features to be delivered in order to deliver your own features. So you don't want to be dependent on another team. And lastly, we looked at a SaaS solution, but we didn't find anything useful there. So we built something ourselves. That's a lot of work, but we managed to do a good job there, actually. I'm going to introduce this system to you now. And it only takes 4 systems, so we'll get to the end in a bit. The first thing that we have and already had actually is the component library. Now, this component library is already part of our design system, which is really cool because you need a design system in order to facilitate the talks between developers and designers, and it helps you make decisions, right? And we said, well, all of the components should go in the component library because that's what a component library is for. This code base was already running on production, so we were using all of these components already in various Nuxt applications, and that's fine. That also meant that this was a trusted code base in the sense that we had full test coverage, we had visual snapshots in place, we had a bit of component testing, we had our docs. So everything was good enough for all of our developers to make sense of this and to be able to continue developing on this. That's really important as well. And by that, we had also the support of the entire front-end department working on this component library. And I can even tell you a whole story about just this topic alone, because I think it's really interesting. But in a sense, this was just what we needed in order to move forward with our system. So we didn't really need to do a lot of work here. This was almost ready to go. We did a couple of things, and I will highlight one of them later. And one of them here, because I said all components go here, and I do mean all components go here. And this means that, like in a normal component library, you would have UI components. And that's fine because you can quickly use them and you're not really sure what they will be used in. Like if you look at a Vuetify, for instance, they built UI components for everybody. Now we built our component library only for ourselves. So we know what we want. We know our customer. So that means that we can make our components a bit smarter. So we can already have those components doing a bit of, it's not bad if they already contain business logic because it's all scoped to our own domain, and that's fine. But it is relevant in this situation. And lastly, we want every component that we have exposed to our platform. And basically what I mean by this is we want to be able to provide our content editors a toolbox with all of the Vue components that they could possibly use to allow them to make the decisions on what a page should look like. And they don't have to run it by us. They could just grab stuff from the toolbox. That allows them to move quickly, and it allows us to not be bothered by content editors, which is good. Next, we have a CMS. And by CMS, well, it's basically just a means of getting data into your system or on a page. And the only thing that we really care about is that it has to have headless capabilities. Now, the CMS that we had some benefits because we were already familiar with working with it. Our content editors were really happy with it. Headless capabilities weren't up to, well, not up to the standard that we would like. So we did some work there, to be honest. And on top of the work that we did on the CMS itself, we also wrote an adapter to make sure that the CMS is always going to be compatible with the system. We need those adapters for any data source that we provide. It could also be a weather service, for instance. And we connect all of the components from our component library, I'm circling back to that toolbox again, to the CMS, so that the content editor actually has a visual representation of the component that it wants to use on a page to make sure that it actually, it represents the page that you're going to publish. So this is part 2. Now, this is an important thing, the content service. This is the newly built system. Yes, so we built this in Node.js, and this is the platform that connects every other system. This is where it all comes together. It validates data models, it does routing, it retrieves and stores data in the database. And while it connects other systems, it also runs in full isolation. So it doesn't really know what type of CMS is connected to it because it runs via adapters. It doesn't really know what kind of component library is connected to the CMS because it doesn't really care. And it also doesn't care about the next system that I will introduce because it just runs by an adapter, it runs in isolation. And that's, I think, what makes this system robust. Again, yeah, there are the adapters. So now we're getting to what basically is the punchline of this talk. the content renderer. And this is the part that is important because a user will interact via this with the platform, like a customer. And customers are, for us, they are a really big deal because, well, if you do e-commerce, they are where the money is. So this is the system that gets the content from the content service. There are some check marks that it needs to tick in order to be compliant. So it needs to work with Vue.js components. It needs to support SSR. It needs to be for performant. It needs to be like a DX is also a very nice to have. So in our case, Nuxt was an obvious candidate because we were already using Nuxt in various places. We are invested in the Vue.js ecosystem, and we really like working with Nuxt. So all these systems put together is basically what our we call it our front-end platform, what our platform looks like. And now I want to take you to the journey of adding stuff into the system, and later on we'll retrieve some data. And again, it's not technical; it's just drawings because I can do drawings. So this is the CMS with a component library attached to it. So a content editor goes here, does some TPD typing, drags some components in, configures them, and then there is the adapter that I was telling about. Yes, there it is. This adapter makes sure that whatever is coming out of the content management system actually follows the data model that we specified, because the data is ours, right? It's like any CMS we can use, but the data is ours. And then our content server picks up the data coming from the adapter and it stores it in the database. Now, this is a bit simplified, of course, but you get the idea. And as I was saying, we don't really care what type of CMS is going to be attached to this, as long as it has an adapter and it allows us to put all of the headless content into the content service, we're fine. And I think later this day, Jacob will tell you a bit about headless CMSs or headless APIs, so that might be interesting to follow as well. So this is a user who is going to be hitting our front-end platform. Hello, user. So he hits the Nuxt instance, and now Nuxt goes into action, and it grabs the path of the file, the route, and it provides it to the content service so that the content service can go in the database and see if there's a route configured for this path, and if not, if there's content configured for this path, and if not, it gives you a beautiful error page, and if there is content, it gives you the content. And that's where everything works really nicely together. So this seems to work, which is really cool. Now, if you do software development, you know that nothing is easy. There's always some challenges, right? And I'm going to highlight two challenges that I think are the most interesting at this moment. And one is, like, this is a big chunk of, that is basically what our component library looked like when we started with this, a big box of Legos. Now, we wanted to allow our content editors to be able to build pages with that toolbox of Legos, but they don't know what the properties are. The good thing is that Vue actually allows you to interact with the validators and whatnot. So we can actually extract all of the properties that are valid for that component, and we can give them back to the CMS as sort of a configuration. So we're providing meta files for every component. We're auto-generating them at this point, which is good because we have a lot of components. And this means that we can tell when we add a new component or change a component, we can tell the content editor or the CMS that a component has certain properties. So there's no manual labor involved anymore. I think this is really cool. And the one thing that we also did was, like, as I said, we don't know what our content editors are up to. They can build pages that are really big. They can build pages that are really small. So our first decision was to ship the entire toolbox, because then at least we know that everything can render, right? Well, that led to a certain amount of megabytes being posted as the bundle size. And that was something that we really didn't like, because it's really bad for performance. And in order to combat this, you have the Nuxt components module, and we can actually read into all of the components that are being used on that page. So we can tree shake everything per page and provide a per page bundle to make sure that the bundle size is actually something that's just relevant for the content that you're talking about. Philip was mentioning bundle size yesterday, I think, on his performance talk. But bad performance is bad for revenue. That's basically the bottom line. So this is good to solve. And in the end, we're actually running this now. So this is, we have this system put together, and it is now on our homepage serving over 100 page views per day, which is just a testament to that it actually works, the system. We do some caching in front of it, obviously, because it doesn't make sense for a not so often changing homepage to do all of these. Well, caching makes sense. So quick shout out to everybody who contributed to this project in our company. They did a really good job. Now, I have to check how I am for time. Not really sure. I'll just continue and I'll see you when I get called back. So when I was drafting these slides, I kind of expected this to happen. So I'm really pleased that this came true. Nuxt 3. So what does that mean for us? Because now we can actually validate the things we set out to do, because we said we want to reduce all of these maintenance and these chores because we don't like them. Now consider these, say, 20 Nuxt instances we had. If we wanted to convert them to Nuxt 3, we had to do that on all these places and make sure that it works for all these places. But if you take a look at our landscape that we have right now, we only have a single Nuxt instance, which is really good. We have our component library is actually already Vue 3 compliant. So we bundle two packages. One is for the bridge version and one is for the 3 version. So we are almost ready. It takes some effort, of course, but it takes effort in one spot instead of all around our landscape. So if we take a look at what we wanted when we started out with this journey, we wanted to have a modular landscape. And I think we kind of achieved that. We wanted to have these independent moving parts. And if I look at our content service, it is just rock solid in a place that needs to be rock solid because it's so closely coupled to what we do as a company. And we wanted to simplify our dependencies. And I think like if we only have to update in one place, that also goes for the component library, for instance, because if we update that, then we would now have to update all of these Nuxt instances, while in the end, it will be just one Nuxt instance. So I think we did a good job here. I'm coming to the end of this. So if you, what I would like you to take away from this entire talk and presentation and all of my ramblings is basically, Nuxt is for us an ideal glue layer between the client and the content. And that's how we are employing it right now. So we're not taking everything out of Nuxt. We're just using what matters to us. And with this modular system, yeah, we facilitate basically our architecture, which we can scale now every way that we like, basically. And I'm really pleased with this development that we made. And lastly, Dutch people are very eigenwijs, but that's not a big deal because we can make things work. And with all of this stuff, like the payoff for us is that we can now work on the stuff that matters, on the cool stuff. So we're not doing that much maintenance and chores anymore. We work on the stuff that matters, like adding cool components, working on new techniques, and that's, I think, really cool. And with that, I came to the end of this presentation. And if you want to learn more about this, I will tweet, I think, the slides to this later on. You can also find me in the chat because I will be sticking around here for some time as well. And basically, that was it.
Hey, I did pretty good so far.
Like, to be honest,
I was muted, so that was totally me. I've been pretty bad at muting myself. Are you able to hear me now?
I'm sorry, Jen. I cannot hear you for a...
Uh-oh. Do you have the tab muted? I know I did that earlier. You can't even hear me say that, but... Well, we could always type the questions. Here. Is there a plan to change the Jumbo site also available in English? Would it be a smooth change?
Yeah, so as I said, we're now doing, instead of working in all these distributed applications, we're doing it in one spot now. So indeed, there are plans to go to English. We're already serving Flemish customers, which is not entirely Dutch. So we're already doing some language toggles. But obviously, there is some work to be done to switch it to English. But as soon as we've done this correctly for all of our pages, we can do this in that single spot because now we have a single point of entry. And that will help us a lot.
All right. have you experienced any downsides of moving from a monolith?
Yeah, I can actually hear you right now. There was a tip of removing my headphones, which actually worked.
Oh, yay, perfect.
That's awesome. Much more interactivity. So any experience moving from a monolith? Well, yeah, the fact is, I think one of my colleagues described it as going from a Cessna to a Boeing in mid-flight. And that sort of describes, I think, the complexity of what you're doing when you're running things on production that are really important to the company. And the way that we are combating this is by basically stripping down bits and pieces every time of that monolith. So to give an example, what we did with the basket, is that we built it in this case in Vue, running client side, because for the basket, for us, it makes sense to do that. And we're just providing and overriding all of the links that pointed to the basket, to the old monolithic offered basket, and redirecting them to the Vue application. And we're also doing this to give you a SSR example for, say, recipes. So what recipes are doing is we reroute all of the recipes from our load balancer, and they do not hit the monolith anymore. They hit a custom Nuxt application. And over time, the plan is to migrate all of these Nuxt applications and to connect them to the front-end platform.
Thank you. And up next, do you have any other tips for maintaining consistency across independent apps?
Yeah, well, do as we did. No, this was exactly what we were experiencing. And this is not even, I'm not sure if I understand the independent apps correctly, but we were maintaining all of our own apps, right? So we had full control over everything, our entire landscape. And still we were having issues with being up to date with all of the dependencies, having them in line. And I can imagine if you mean by independent also third parties or whatever, then it will be just even worse of an experience. So I would say try to reduce all of these dependencies as in any way you can. Like what I've told is just a story that works for us. Doing it this way, it will not work for everybody. You need to have you need to be of a certain scale in order to even begin thinking about these sort of, like, it is not a simple solution, right? The simplest solution is a single Nuxt instance running your business. But for us, it's not enough. So we have the manpower to build something complex. So we decided to build something complex to make our maintenance easier. But it's always a trade-off.
Yeah, and I feel like you kind of answered it, but I kind of could go a bit more into with your Nuxt apps, like migrating to version 3 and the type of apps that you use to migrate.
Yeah, so in order to do that, the situation right now is that we have our new platform serving parts of our website. And that front-end platform is using the same component library that we also use in these Nuxt instances that still are alive because they still have a reason to live. And what we can do now is we have our component library publishes a package that is Vue 2 compliant, but it also publishes a package that is Vue 3 compliant. So we publish 2 packages of the same component library. So we have tried to keep the source code as singular as possible. So one source to generate multiple components. But this means that we can make a choice to which component library we want to use. And that means which version do we want to use. And this means for, say, the front-end platform, if we want to migrate that to Nuxt 3, then we could do that because it has little dependencies on, it has little dependency problems because it's just a standalone thing now and it runs in that isolation. So we can let that point to the component library that spews out number 3. And make sure that that's solid. And then we have a plan, or we have a validated plan of approach of doing the same thing iteratively over the other Nuxt apps, or we have the choice to migrate these Nuxt apps into the front-end platform, which will then mean to also upgrade them while we're doing that.
I love how all of these questions are actually leading to each other, because it's like, as you're talking about that and moving everything, but then also like, how do you scale and then onboard new people, especially like you're having, as you scale, like going from Next to Next3, you have to retrain everybody for that. And then also like scaling it all and onboarding new devs. Like, how do you work with that experience?
Yeah, so the goal of what we are trying to achieve here is to actually make this onboarding a smoother experience. Because if you started to work here at our company years ago, you would be lost in all of the applications that we had. So we are already trying to simplify that by just reducing the amount of applications. And in the end, so the vision of this is that we have a single application that does the rendering for us. And we have a single application that does the data fetching for us. So if you want to know where you need to be, it should be fairly clear based on what you're trying to achieve. And as part of onboarding this, I have to say that the team who has been working on this, they grew in size, so they're going to be split up into 2 teams already. But they are doing a really good job in internally communicating how to work with this, what you need, how to make changes. So they're basically doing, it looks like an open source project, but then internally, basically.
Oh, that's fun. An internal open source project. I like that. I like
that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how the internal source. I'm not sure.
All right. Up next, which CMS system do you use?
All right. So we are currently using Adobe Experience Manager, which is actually, I'd never heard of it before I started working here, but it is like enterprise level CMS. And the cool thing about Adobe Experience Manager is that you can do really good what you see is what you get editing. And it was a good fit at the time that we started to use this, because it can also render pages really well. So it does a lot of, it renders everything basically, and it caches the pages really well. So it is, at that time, it was a really good fit. If we were to choose right now, I'm not sure if that would be the top pick, but like, you roll with what you have, right? So that makes just sense to not switch it over right now. But we are with an adapter, we can just easily plug in a new one next to the one that we currently have if we want to.
Awesome. And second to last question, what is your position and strategy in regard to Nux3 migration? I feel like you kind of already answered that, but with the applications, but have you detected any challenges, strengths, or have any overall advice?
Yeah, the challenge that we have, and I'm not sure, like, this is from our perspective, is we have a lot of store-related actions. And one of the things that I actually discussed today with another developer was the basket is using a lot of interactions outside of its application, because the basket needs to be accessible from basically everywhere that we have products. So that's going to be an issue or something that, well, maybe challenge is a better word. We are thinking about doing some extra layer in between what we now have as like Vuex as a store and whatever we use with Nux3, and that might be just UState or Piña or whatever. But there will definitely be some challenges in getting those two to work together and preserve reactivity. And so no good solution on that yet. We might also just do it server side. I'm not sure, actually.
All right. And thank you for that insight. It's definitely something that I feel like everybody's discovering their own way of doing things, and best practices is the best we can ask for. All right. Last but not least, what is something that you're grateful for?
So I followed a couple of icons right on stage. So I'm already grateful to just be part of this conference, because I think like the Nux community is really like a warm bath. It's really welcoming for everybody who wants to learn or contribute or get involved. And I'm really grateful to also be part of it in a way. And I'm also grateful for, I have to wave now because I think my kids are at home now looking at me and they do not speak a word English. But I am also grateful for their support at home.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you again for coming and hanging out with us today and your presentation. And y'all, is it Joran? How do I say your name properly? Because I don't think you heard me earlier when I was stuttering over it.
That might have been a good thing. No, I say Joran.
Joran.
Yeah, that's good enough. I'll take it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again for joining. Everybody reach out to him on Twitter and follow along. And thank you again.